大家好，我是刘家豪. Welcome back, guys. So today's just a quick video, and I promised a long time ago that I would do a couple of reviews of a few movies, and today I just want to talk a little bit about the 800. Now, I did a video as well on this quite a while ago as well, about a year ago, in commemoration for the 800, the one who fought Sehung Warehouse, and for that video, it's my most viewed video. And one of the comments asked, "Hey, can you do a review on not just the 800, but also 1942? I think Taierzhuang, Life and Death in Nanking, and a few others." And so this right here, I just want to talk a couple of thoughts on how I view on the 800. Uh, I haven't watched it in a while. I haven't been able to find it, to watch. So it is a bit old since I have seen the film, but it's a good film. I enjoyed it. It has its up and downs for sure. There were a couple of things in it that I think are more for the glamour of film and television rather than actual historical accuracy. But there is a lot of historical authenticity in the film. There is the part about how one of the soldiers, how he jumps out of the building and blows himself up with the grenades, and there's the part about how the fact that they were grabbing soldiers off of the streets and threatening them to be killed because they got lost from the units. It was very common at this time, for especially for the more lower ranked and more lesser trained soldiers and units to have executions, to have this harsher corporal and military punishments because of the problem of discipline and desertion in the army at the time. So that being said, it is something that I do appreciate that the film provided, as part of its piece and how it portrayed these issues during the time. Something that I believe a lot of Chinese films, especially when it comes to history and war, they like to put up these little sections of like text saying, "Oh, this happened, that happened at this time." And for a film, it does seem a bit off-putting, especially in the way that films in the U.S. tend to portray war and stuff. But for these type of films, a lot of Chinese war films from World War II, they gave these contexts to give you an understanding of what happened. And I think that's very important because a lot of people who go into film or to come in to watch anything, sometimes they don't have the full context. Sometimes they don't fully understand, or they might have some sort of misconception. And so having that little section at the beginning, at the end, it does give you the chance to be able to say, "Hey, this is what's the situation at the time." You get a better understanding of what's going on. Now there are a couple scenes in the film where I'm just kind of like, "Huh?" You know, for one, there's the anti-air gun. Now I am pretty sure that the 88th did have anti-air and anti-tank equipment, a lot of times being interchangeable. But I don't think the 524th Regiment, who was deployed at Zehang, actually had any anti-air or anti-tank equipment, like proper ones. You can consider machine guns to be anti-air equipment, but it's not the same kind as like a 13.2 millimeter anti-air gun or like. And then there's the other major part, which was the nighttime attack, the night raid, when the Japanese came in with the knives and they came in to the warehouse with the knives in and the with the knives and their ladders to try and take. Now with the knife part, that did not happen. The way that actual battle occurred was they did a night like like a they tried to storm the warehouse, but like with actual soldiers. With they came with guns, they came with bayonets, and they tried to take the warehouse, right? Actually with the ladders. But I don't recall any use of like the waterways or to come in from the inside to take the warehouse. There was a lot of civilian involvement in the battle actually. How much it was, I'm not too sure. Like where they had the guy and the telephone line portrayed as like running across the bridge to bring over the telephone wire. I cannot confirm if that did happen in the actual events of the battle. But when they did send over young Huimin, the female Girl Scout, she did actually partake in the battle, and she did actually take that journey across the river and bring over the letters back to the other side, into back into international settlement, in which it helped give the idea of there are 800 there. In reality, there were not 800 soldiers. It was more around 420 men. The regiment had already suffered casualties prior in other parts of Shanghai, and so they weren't a full strength regiment. And the whole point of Sihang was not to be, you know, these men were ready to die. These men knew that they were the last ones in the city. They were supposed to be the rear guard as the rest of the Chinese army left Shanghai to reorganize and regroup down towards Suzhou and Nanjing. This was because Japanese soldiers were landing in Hangzhou Bay and around the city of Hangzhou. As a result, if the Chinese could not escape the city of Shanghai, that there would have been around 500,000 soldiers, trapped in the Shanghai Peninsula in that area. And in that event, it would have been a catastrophe for the Chinese army. So it was necessary for this retreat to occur. Hence why the deployment at Sehang warehouse. I enjoyed the way that they portrayed the weapons. I enjoyed the way that they portrayed the people. And in a way, it got through a anti-war message that I don't think a lot of movies, especially when it comes to war, are able to portray. They brought up a lot on the conflict between the average soldier and the politics. Especially when they brought up the Kuomintang leadership, when they had the office meeting with Xie Jinyuan, they were talking about like the consequences of having the war, the consequences of having these men fight here, and they were they asked themselves, what is the point? What is the purpose? And the film does bring up a lot of this military psyche. How does the soldier feel? It wasn't for national glory, and it wasn't for fighting for the country. Soldiers as individuals that were the main characters in depicting in the film were fighting because they just want to survive. I do believe that does bring out a strong anti-war message, while also still having the historical accuracies and the authenticity. There was the raising of the flag scene. There was this concern from international sources about being potentially bombed by the Japanese as the thing continues. And there was the use of gas warfare at the Battle of Shanghai, just not so close towards the international settlement. It was like other areas, and it was used multiple times, not just at Shanghai, but many other battles throughout the war between China and Japan in World War II, in where chemical warfare was actually used as a means of warfare by the Japanese. That's really special to me. I really enjoyed the fact that they had all these different conflicting ideas, and it gets you thinking, and it gets you to understand and be more aware about how very conflicting and how very I guess gray the understanding of war is, and how the understanding of people who do fight in them also think. It isn't just the glory, it isn't just for the cause, and it isn't just to defend the country. Again, I implore you guys to go see other Chinese war films, especially from 2006, 2008, before 2015 ish. I'll give some recommendations as well. Now, the best recommended one, I believe, would be 100 Regiments Offensive. That movie is probably the best example of what most people would think of when they hear Chinese war film. It wouldn't be 800. It would never be 800. The way that 800 was portrayed is extremely differing. And I love that difference. And I love that development and change in how war movies are being made, and I hope that more film and I do hope that more films that do portray war do take this route. If you watch Wolf Warriors, that shit sucks. I hate that. That movie is just Rambo, but like modernized and put into Chinese. That's literally all it is. You gotta understand that the way wars war, there aren't always correctly a right or wrong side. A lot of the times, war isn't always, this is the bad guy or that's the good guy. You know, it's hard to portray and it's hard to really say who's in the right in a war, especially when it comes to an era and a time where both sides did horrendous things and where both sides were doing, were committing into a war that no one wanted and one that people would have been better off if it did not occur. This is especially true in China right until the Second Sino-Japanese War. During the war era, there was a lot of atrocities. There was a lot of destruction in the country, and among different warlords fighting within China against other Chinese people. This is a country that was extremely devastated for 20 years prior, and having that long-term devastation does muddy the waters and how willing the populace and the people enlisted are willing to fight. And when they brought on the Hubei security forces and how they were unwilling to fight and how they weren't, you know, really in for the cause, I enjoyed that type of portrayal. And I do really hope that we can see more of that because it's really a time period, again, where it's hard to say who's in the right and who's in the wrong. You can say, "Oh, this is the one who started it," or you can say that this is the one who was not in the defense, or this was in the offense. But then when you get into questions like who is in the right, who's in the wrong, who did worse, who did do as bad, it's really hard to say because when both sides are doing just as bad as the other, you can't really sit there and say this is the bad one and this is the good one. You can't look at Zhang Zongchang, can't look at Cao Kun or Wu Peifu and say, "Oh, Sun Chuanfeng is the bad one and Wu Peifu is the good one." Both of them were conscripting people in mass amounts. Everyone was spending large sums of their money in the military, and there was a lot of looting and pillaging and burning of villages and towns and cities, and the use of press gangs and the use of child soldiers, and the enlistment of young men for years. Not even a couple months, years. We're talking years since the end of Yuan Shikai's empire, the Empire of China, when he tried to become emperor in 1916. Between that period and as far as 1936, right after the Xi'an incident, there has been long-term infighting in China, whether it's between the Kuomintang and the Wuhan government of Wang Jingwei, or whether it's between Sun Yat-sen and if or whether it's between Sun Zhongshan and Chen Zhongming down in Guangdong, or if it's between Liu Longting and Li Zongren and up over in Guangxi. There was just so much infighting, so much conflict and war between everyone in the period that you just can't say anything really on who is right, who's wrong. But what you can say is how affected the people, how affected the soldiers, and the conflict that people had, because that's the only thing that you can really be definite about in a war. And that's probably the best thing you can do to portray something in a war film, which is simply the fact that a majority of people don't want to have war and don't want to have conflict, and how being put into those situations shifts and changes how people are, how they act, and what their beliefs are once thrown back against the wall and are forced to make such a decision. The 800 is an amazing film, and I encourage you all who do end up watching, or to even rewatch it now that you listen to me, to take notes and be an active viewer and see how people in the film react and what they believe in, and how that changes and develops across the film because they're put into the situation of war. Because that is the only real thing that you can give an answer for when doing a war film. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. 再见。